Hello, I am Rudy Rivera. To you and my friends all over the world, welcome to my YouTube channel, Conversations with Rudy Rivera. Please click subscribe and you will have access to many, many more interesting interviews with interesting guests on interesting topics. Don't forget, subscribe. I will see you later. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm excited today that we are going to talk with three distinguished and highly sought after professionals in Mexico on the topic of nearshoring. I have with me Joaquin Contreras. He's a partner at Dentons. Felipe Chapula, managing partner at CCN Abogados. And Gustavo Almaraz, who is with Estetica, probably the biggest public relations and crisis management agency in Mexico. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for appearing. So nearshoring has become like just this incredible new topic for Mexico. I've been traveling to Mexico for quite some time, and it seems that now it's being talked about more and more. Let's start off with first by, Felipe, tell us what the nearshoring concept is. It's not anything anyone invented. It's just a term that they put to a movement back into real estate in Mexico, right?
Absolutely, Rudy. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Nearshoring is simply a movement of relocation to leading markets around the world. In this particular case, if we see the United States as the key consumer market, obviously countries around the world are highly seeking to relocate to closer shores, as the definition so explains. And this for a variety of reasons, right? One of the major things that started this is the COVID crisis, which brought on the supply chain crisis, and also the fact that a lot of things back east are getting very expensive, especially logistics costs, freight costs, the downtime it takes to bring things over, and other ancillary things like the war in Ukraine, or maybe even the U.S.-China commercial relationships, etc. So nearshoring is not a Mexican term. It's not exclusive for Mexico, but many countries that are relocating are seeing in Mexico the best option for a variety of opportunities that Mexico provides, right? Not just geographically. Obviously, our geography is very easy to pinpoint. We're right next to the United States. But there are a lot of other key strong factors that make Mexico the best option over other countries that could also represent nearer shores, if we want to say that way. I'll stop right there to allow my colleagues to also opine.
Well, and I would ask you, Joaquin, why Mexico? Okay, feel free to expand on what Felipe said, but I received an email from one of my lawyers in Costa Rica who sent an email, well, why not Costa Rica? I said, well, that's a good question. So why Mexico as opposed to other places in Latin America?
Sure. Well, I think the short answer would be, the obvious answer, the first point would be obviously geographic location. But that's not the only one. That's the obvious. I mean, we are close to the largest economy in the world. Mexico has become certainly the most important trade partner of the US. And Mexico has been preparing for this opportunity for decades. In fact, this year is gonna be the 30th anniversary of the enactment of the North American Free Trade Agreement. So I would say that in addition to the location, in addition to other elements that we will discuss, the legal framework and all the supply chain network that have been developed in Mexico during all this period in key sectors like automobiles, electronics, pharmaceutical is certainly the most important aspect of the reason why. Why is it as Felipe explained it, all the relocation, particularly from Asian companies, from Asian markets, that heavily relied on inputs from China, let's put it more concrete. As a result of this, all disruption, and in particular, I would say the trade war between the US and China that caused the raising of tariffs by the Trump administration, that is certainly one of the elements that make Mexico attractive. If you combine this with the NAFTA, well, now the USMCA agreement, and all the possibilities, the chapter that regulates the entry to the access to the US market on the preferential treatment, that's what the companies are looking for. As Felipe explained, near to shore, near to the market. So if I cannot ship directly to Mexico, to the US for a variety of reasons, and then I can go to Mexico, which also has a very competitive labor force, that's another element, competitive labor force in particular sectors. That makes very attractive for the investor to look to Mexico for nearshoring projects. So there are many challenges, many benefits that we can discuss in here, but I think that's, in short answer, that's the starting point, no, to why Mexico is key.
Well, Gustavo, what I find interesting is that a number of companies from Asia, South Pacific are coming to Mexico. And they were the ones who were typically sending everything to the US. Mm-hmm. So I know that Felipe's office has a Japan desk for its Japanese clients. So do you see a huge flux of people coming in from China, Korea, and Japan to invest in Mexico so they can have their distribution centers?
So thanks, Rudy, for the invitation. I just want to clear up, I have voice problems, but also I am the executive president of Grupo Estrategica Politica of GEP. You mentioned, I think, another firm. I don't know.
Yeah, I mentioned it's that. Yeah, you're right.
Estrategia.
Yeah.
Estrategia Politica. So I would just add to your first question, Rudy, that we need to look at Mexico in two other concepts that are very relevant for this discussion. So there's not only the matter of nearshoring, which I think Joaquin and Felipe explained really well, that we're close to the US, but also there's other concepts which Mexico has in favor of itself, which is the friendshoring part of things. That's another concept, and the ally shoring. So the US is trying to understand who's close, who's an ally, and who's a friend. You know, that's why they're sending some issues and some manufacturing processes to allies and to friends. But Mexico has all the three elements, you know, that really work. So that's why I do think, and this is a conversation that I had with a lot of my clients, but also the authorities, is that they're looking at certain Asian companies coming in, but not playing, I would say, by the correct rules. You know, some of them are not registering correctly. So you do not know how many Chinese companies are in Mexico. But the reason is they want to be close to the manufacturing chains. You know, they want to be close to the US, which is the biggest consumer for them, or where they have their added value. And the best backdoor to go into the US is being in Mexico. You know, so yes, we do have a lot of Asian companies coming here. We need to analyze where Mexico stands in some treaties, like TPAT, where Vietnam is, and also Vietnam is coming, or China is going through Vietnam to bring products to Mexico to get into the US. So I think we are looking at a lot of investment. The thing is, how they're coming in, it's really shady and not well known.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that poses. Go ahead, Joaquin, and then I'll.
No. I think Gustavo touched a very relevant point, and I just wanted to put it in context what we have seen in practice here in our law firm, and I'm sure in the other firms too, which is the three types or four types of of nearshoring projects that are coming into Mexico. The first one is very surprising for us, but that's what is happening, is that big Chinese corporations, big Chinese group, even from Hong Kong, are coming by acquiring already existing manufacturing plants owned by either European groups or US groups, and that's very interesting. So in other words, they are mergers and acquisitions. We are representing clients that have acquired these large groups, and they acquired the European part, the European parent companies, or even the US companies, and those companies all the way down to Mexico have plants. The auto parts sector is one of them. So the second type of investment that we have is, of course, what we call the tier 1 suppliers, which is companies that are coming directly to start new manufacturing plants. And the example is some industrial parks in Nuevo León, where they are full of Chinese companies, all around big manufacturers. The Telsa example is one of them. So that's the second one. And the third one is also very surprising, because it's US companies owned by, in this case, for example, we have 2 Korean groups that also rely on Chinese inputs. Those US companies are moving their production to Mexico to establish a manufacturing operation and take advantage of the treaty. So those are the 3 scenarios, if you want to call it, or type of nearshoring project. And there's another one, but we have seen that from here, they are taking the opportunity to ship goods or export finished goods to Latin American countries. So that's what we have seen in practice, and it makes sense with what Gustavo just explained. How are they coming to Mexico? Which are the different structures that we are looking at? And of course, this is just the beginning. Mexico has attracted, I think, 8% of what last year of what is expected, and is still in number 7, even after Vietnam in nearshoring attraction of investment. So,
Rudy, I'd like to add.
Go ahead, Felipe.
Yeah, on what Joaquin just said, and all that, I agree with all that's being said, but we're not looking at the why. We're looking at how and through what channels, but the why. Why are they doing that, landing on our shores? And the reason is pretty obvious if you compare it to everybody else in the continent, because obviously there's nearshoring happening in Colombia, there's nearshoring happening in Brazil, there's nearshoring happening all along the continent. Why Mexico above others? Well, and we said geography, right? That's fine. First, we are the country with most free trade agreements in the world. Let's stop right there. Nobody in the world has more free trade agreements than Mexico with other countries.
all right.
For good or for bad, these nearshoring or relocating countries want to take advantage of that. Obviously, they want to focus on the USMCA, right? Because the US is the biggest market. But once they're here, they start to be more diverse as to what channels they start to tap. And they start focusing on channels like Japan, or if they're coming from other non-Asian countries, obviously, right? So there's so many opportunities here. The demographics, right? 50% of the Mexican population is at a working age right now. You're talking about over 60 million Mexicans that are 16 and above and within working age, and obviously growing. You have a pretty much highly skilled labor force. You have the largest network of paved roads in all Latin America. Nobody has more paved roads than us. You have 50 customs ports. You have a variety of other benefits that obviously, if you're trying to go into the US, that's your main reason. But there are a lot of other important reasons. And for those companies, especially those that are publicly traded, they're very interested in investing in countries that have ESG regulations, right? Mexico is one of those. So now we're not just talking about those that want to bypass the system or those that want to land in Mexico to somehow backdoor into the US. There is a ton of companies that want a front door into the US, not just backdoor. So for those that want to front door, there's even more opportunities, legal opportunities. There is, even though we get a lot of bad press, there is a state of law in Mexico. There is a legal system. Foreign investment is equally respected and protected than domestic capital or domestic companies. So the playing field is pretty level for anyone. And if you are here legitimately, let's say, you will even get better opportunities in all reality, right? So fortunately, Mexico is very mature with regards to foreign investment, even way before NAFTA, right? Ford Motor Company, General Motors, Chrysler, they've been here for 70 years or 60 years, and many others, right? So Mexico is not a rookie in the foreign investment arena in all senses, right? The labor, the real estate, and pretty much everything is open to private investment. You can own land directly, industrial parks, industrial facilities, any and all of your IP rights and any and all of your assets and properties. There is no government investment, et cetera. It's an open free market. Aside from certain small, very specific sectors, pretty much it's an open playing field, right? So those are the added reasons why Mexico is the natural nearshoring country, right?
Well, I think the why is important that you so wisely pointed out. I mean, for years, Mexico has been overshadowed by Brazil, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now it's changing, and Banco Santander, who's the largest local bond underwriter, anticipates 1.5 billion in investment, this year. So the investment's kind of significant. But what something that Gustavo said, and I kind of want to, you may or may not be in a position to answer the question, but if there is a trade embargo, like for example with China. Let's just say that you cannot bring in any Chinese transistors. Does that mean that a Chinese company that invests in Mexico has to make them in Mexico? So I would think that you can't just import all your parts, assemble them in Mexico, and expect to avoid the trade embargoes or the trade tariffs. What's your thought on that?
Well,
I think that.
Go ahead,
Joaquin. Well, so I think that's not my area of expertise. You do have certain industries which have the obligation to create certain components in the North American region. In the automotive, you have certain percentages that to be called or to be part of the treaty, they have to be not only parts have to have a certain percentage of material, but also the labor behind it has to be paid in certain wages. So those are kind of some of the reasons, Rudy. I do not see a total embargo on the Chinese, obviously, imports towards Mexico and not even towards the US, because they need a lot of the manufacturing that comes and the components that come from that side of the world. But I do think that we need to tighten up the rules of how certain materials come in because they're affecting the local economy and they will affect, obviously, the trade with the US. Mexico has made a decision, Rudy, to let the Asian countries and specifically the Chinese to play in very specific areas that do not, I would say, generate any conflict with the US. They're not going to let them play in very strategic areas like telecom, ducts, gas, energy. But if a Chinese company wants to come to Mexico and elaborate a specific piece, they're going to let them at this point, So I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
I think it does. I think it does. Because for example, in the US, if you say made in America, okay, everything has to be made in America from what I understand. But if you have Chinese components, okay, that you're bringing in, and there's an issue with saying made in America. So that's
the rules are very, they play a lot with the rules, Rudy, because made in Mexico, made in America, you have components that come all over the world, but once you assemble, that gives you the possibility to say made in America, and I'm talking about the region, right?
Yeah,
right.
If I may just elaborate a little bit, that I think they have to play by the rules, as we have said. In other words, we already have under the USMCA clear what we call the rules of origin. So the idea here is Mexico cannot be used only as a pass-through, as a backdoor, as Felipe put it. So the USMCA has developed a very, I would say, strong set of rules which are contained in Chapter 4, which is the rule of origin. Just to put it in more simple, Chinese inputs coming into Mexico for that reason from any other country will have to comply. In other words, we'll have to comply with these rules in order to have what we call originating goods that can later be exported to Mexico, to US or Canada, for example, and comply with what we know, different rules like the content, national content rules, labor requirements, and others. So in other words, the manufacturing operation in Mexico based on Chinese input has to result in a transformation of the good into a finished good that is subject to treatment under the USMCA rules. So that's a very important component. We still need to go, I think we still need to go to some rules that may really enforce this chapter, because that's the key. In other words, in addition to bringing the materials, we also need to comply with labor standards that are set up in Chapter 23 of the NAFTA. And so the idea is not to use Mexico as a pass-through, but to be really a manufacturing hub of originating NAFTA goods. So for that, I think we are prepared. We have the legal framework under the NAFTA, and also there are other programs like export programs, like the IMEX program, the Maquiladora program, that will give us the rule that they will have to comply with in order to have access to the North American. For example, this year, as you know probably, that the automobile sector, for example, increased the rule of origin for national content, NAFTA content to 75%, which is going to be in full place this year. There's also a rule for labor content, which requires companies to produce part of the vehicle coming from places where the labor is paid at I believe it's $16 per hour, something like that. And then, of course, we have another rule regarding the use of steel and aluminum. So these two new rules, just mentioned in the automobile sector, are examples of how the investment will have to be structured so that they may comply with these rules and be able to access the North American market. So
yeah, just interjecting on that, and I totally agree. Those are, let's say, the driving markets of manufacturing in Mexico, right? Automotive, auto parts, pharma, heavy machinery. Those things are always the driving sectors. And when the USMCA was negotiated per the renegotiating of NAFTA, those were, among other specific sectors, highly debated, highly discussed, and highly regulated. but there's another universe of markets
Sure.
that are pretty much on a plain vanilla type structure of rules of origin. The rules of origin and all those other ones really aren't focusing if the input is Chinese, et cetera. It's not nationality discriminatory. It's pretty much just treated as non-originating from the North
Exactly.
American region. So everything not North American is non-originating. Doesn't matter if it's Brazilian, doesn't matter if it's Chinese, or if it comes from Australia, right? So at the end of the day, you've got this mix of components from multiple origins, and what you try to do is exceed the thresholds for regional content value, or sometimes even simpler, which is just getting the tariff shifting rules to work in your favor. If there is sufficient transformation and not simple assembly, you will very likely achieve that tariff shifting rules to allow that finished product to be treated as originating from the region and allow it to free flow within the US, Mexico, and Canada. But not just that. If you get that opportunity to treat it from the region, it means it can also be treated as Mexican. And coming back to the network of treaties, you can send it to European countries, it can go to France, it can go to Spain, it can go to Germany, or it can go to one of our APEC partners, or Japan, which is another treaty party, etc. Very likely at zero rate. So you end up turning your Mexican investment not just as a front door for the US market, but as a platform for global exporting. So you could really go wide and long on this, right?
Yeah, I've often said in my international law class that the shortest distance between 2 points is not necessarily the straight line, right? So you'd have to come Mexico, Europe. Yeah, Gustavo, you were going to add to that.
No, I was just going to add that the Mexican government is focusing on their nearshoring strategy is focused on semiconductors, automotive, which and more focused on electromobility, electrical and electronics, on the pharma, medical, pharmaceutical devices, and agro businesses. So that's where the Mexican government is centering its efforts to try to push the nearshoring and the other products that Felipe is mentioning right now.
Well, there's a guy named Rodolfo Ramos, and he's got to be a cool guy because his name is Rodolfo, okay? He is a strategist with Bradesco BBI, and he says that, the capital markets in Mexico still need to be developed more, that the capital markets are underdeveloped compared to their counterparts, and the next president will need to push new policies to attract investment, especially in the clean energy section. Do you agree with that? Joaquin, do you agree with it?
Yes, certainly I do. I mean, capital markets is an important area that needs to be developed, but I think the most important part for that would be that the Mexican government has to develop, as Gustavo said, and it goes to the same point, that it has to create a real, I would say, industrial policy to focus on those sectors that can be more attractive. I mean, there's a whole branch of sectors, but what I think some experts are saying is that there is not a clear industrial policy and here, this is one of the challenges. For example, I would say that, for example, another area would be to try to promote national participation, national suppliers, the participation of national suppliers, national content. That's a key area where an industrial policy has to be focused on. And so one of the areas also is infrastructure. We do have important crossing points that connect the plans or the manufacturing plants to where the point. There are 3 specific projects in Laredo, in Otay, and in Colombia, where the 3 governments have announced that they will need to expand those projects, the bridges, like the Laredo, Texas bridge and others, to be able to meet the expected investment in the nearshoring. And the other one is the ports. I think Felipe mentioned it at the beginning. We do have a system of ports, but if we are expecting to have this flow from Asian countries, we'll have to look at the Pacific, where we do have to admit that the ports, which are Lázaro and Manzanillo, particularly Manzanillo, are now, Manzanillo is very crowded and has very limited capacity for expansion. So that will force the government to see other options, for example, Mazatlan or Ensenada, but that can have enough connections to bring the goods to the plants, right? And that will require raising capital, not only perhaps create new investment vehicles or resume the investment vehicle like the PPPs and other ways, because it cannot be only funded by government investment, you know. So that's some of the ideas. I don't know if
I just want to add.
Go ahead, Gustavo.
Rudy,
Yes, go ahead.
that the capital markets is an issue, maybe, but there's other issues that need to be attended before that.
Exactly.
You know, I agree with everything that Joaquin has mentioned. I would say 2 of them that are very, very critical for the nearshoring to come at a more aggressive pace is legal certainty in some areas. I would say that is vital. It seemed cliche and yeah, world peace, but we do need legal certainty, and that's something that this government in certain areas is really not delivering. And on the legal certainty, the clean energy, renewables, and sufficient energy for the plants and the investments to be stable in their production. That is a major issue. I would say that those 2 issues are the ones that investors are looking to have when they come to Mexico.
Well, that's the biggest $1 million question, right? Is Mexico ready? Okay. And we have a question from one of our LinkedIn audience members, says, Manuel del Valle, retired judge and arbitrator. What would be the impact, if any, on nearshoring if Trump is elected president?
That's a very important question, right? And I don't know if we have.
I don't think he knows. I don't think he knows, because he can change every 5 minutes. Okay.
If we follow what he did in his first term, I think. Well, remember that he threatened to cancel. Well, I don't know if the word is cancel, but not to renew the North American Free Trade Agreement, now the USMCA. And he is the one who has threatened Mexico with raising tariffs, for example, in the case of the immigration problem, which, by the way, that pressure that he put on the government worked for him. And so, I don't know, I mean, it's clearly, if you listen to the recent Trump speeches, it's clear that he has created some kind of fear in investment. I mean, I think the USMCA is so, I mean, the principles and the way it has been structured is a shield against any political changes, but you never know. Trump, a US president, has a lot of authority in trade matters. And there are concepts such as national security and issues that can always be used to try to reduce the impact of trade between Mexico and US. But let's see, I don't know, Gustavo, what idea do you have?
Let's not forget that the policies of President Trump against China were the initiations help Mexico.
Yeah.
So that's one point that we cannot forget.
Sure.
For the business community in the U.S., the main threat for them is President Trump. That is an analysis that came up in The Economist. The top heads of companies in the US believe that President Trump is a threat. What I see as the two biggest threats in the nearshoring process and what can hit the Mexican economy is two major things. We have a revision in 2026, which I think President Trump being president can be very aggressive, and that can put a little tension into the relationship. And also, what I think can do a lot of damage is the threat of the closing of the border lines. That is business content because of migration. That is a major threat for business continuity. So he will be more aggressive on that side. But Mexico is also very important for the US. Whatever he does against Mexico will hit his states and will hit his part of his constituents, so he cannot drive that for long. And what Mexico can offer is cooperation on security and migration. That has been the trading off for certain issues. But I don't know, Felipe, has any other comments?
No, I agree. And when President Trump was in office, the prior term, obviously it created a lot of stress in the investment. He was not afraid of both making the use of NAFTA difficult, or the continuance of NAFTA difficult, and with that same token, picking a fight with China, right? So you've got this double whammy where you have made life difficult to China, but for the main supplier of the U.S. market, you're also making life difficult. Don't forget, last year Mexico became the #1 trading partner for the United States. So we can, like Gustavo said, we continue to be very important. Last week at a conference, I heard, and it's not my expression, but I thought it was very intelligent. The scrambled egg theory. The relationship between Mexico and the U.S. is like a scrambled egg. You can't unscramble it now. We're just too tied together. Undoing what has been created for the past 30 or 50 years is virtually impossible. Like Gustavo says, hitting us will impact the U.S. constituents, consumers, people. We're just too tied in together. It would be...
and more so than other countries, too. I mean, we hit hard other countries.
Certainly, yeah.
It would not affect us as much as if we hit Mexico hard, right?
The reality is that let's assume for a moment that we do get a divorce from the United States and the U.S. continues to be at war commercially with China. Okay, who would be the U.S.'s next partner? At these near shores, you're talking about Brazil and Colombia, probably. Colombia does not have neither the size, the manpower to take on all that investment. And Brazil is complex, to say the least, right? So, and it's very, very far away, and then it has a series of other logistic issues. It just makes no sense, really. At this point, it's very hard to find a substitute for Mexico. I know President Trump would not see that as a deterrent. He will try to engage and to maybe be a little bit of an aggressor to enhance the relationship in benefit of the U.S., which is it's valid, right? It's all part of doing business at the end of the day. But that, and as opposed to saying, will this just basically break up with President Trump? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Well,
and I was just looking at Twitter right here, that in a political rally today with President, this is Biden, the leader of the most important union in the U.S., I think is from the automobile industry, endorsed Biden, provided the support, but it also declared that demanded the USTR to impose tariffs on Mexican Mexican imports. So, I mean, this is politics, of course. They are in the middle of a campaign. But again, it gives you an idea of what we just explained, that it's not in the interest of politics will always be a part of this discussion and trade. And as I mentioned, the power that a U.S. president have can be used broader than the mere trade aspect of it. So I just mentioned this because it caught my attention that how is it that both political parties in the U.S. will be using Mexico as a political tool, if you want to say, you know?
Well, the time we have left, I want to cover a few issues, okay? Because everyone's talking about nearshoring and what a great opportunity it is. But I've worked in Latin America for 30 years, okay? I've looked in Brazil, worked in Colombia. I set up an operation in Mexico. I managed litigation in Mexico. Felipe knows the kind of work I do in Mexico, but it's not easy, okay? It's not easy. And I don't want people to leave here thinking, oh my God, Mexico's this great place, it's paradise. But there's some inherent problems with the nearshoring, you know, one of which we talked about. Does Mexico have the infrastructure? Okay. It's not just the Mexican government that has to go along with it. It has to be the state and the municipal government. And the famous NAFTA case is the Metalclad case, you know, that went up to arbitration and was appealed in San Luis Potosí when, you know, Metalclad, an investor under NAFTA, couldn't get its plant built because of the local regulations. Okay. I've had litigation pending for 10 years in Mexico. And, you know, there's restrictions on land. And even something as simple as picking the right lawyer, okay, because Mexico has no bar that regulates lawyer conduct. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for the people who are on a shoestring budget, right? So what are some of the risks involved that, you know, our listeners should be aware of when doing that? And I haven't even mentioned the cultural problems, you know, the cultural differences, the day-to-day management. So Gustavo, you're the political strategist here. I mean, let's start with you. What's your thought on that? I mean, and before you go in, I mean, there was a case and the Mexican government seized the property of an owner in Santa Fe. They just went in pursuant to some decree in 19 something. We're shutting you down. You know, that's the kind of stuff that prevents, you know, foreign investment.
Definitely. That's why I was talking about legal certainty, right?
Yes.
But I think you mentioned something that is very important, is if you're coming to Mexico, you really need to understand, first of all, that you need the correct advice and the correct advisors to come to Mexico. You know, you said it, not only the lawyers, but also the political advisor, but also the comms advisor, the local advisor, logistics. So I had a call at one point, you know, when everyone was saying Mexico is the best place to be. We have logistics, we have infrastructure, we have blah, 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 blah. At the end, I was the one that spoke, and I said, yes, everything is correct, but you do not have the political momentum to come in. If you try to come in right now, you will be shut down. So I think you need the correct advice. Or on the other hand, you might have the politically correct environment, but maybe you do not have the legal stands to come in. So the advice is critical, first of all. Second, you really need to analyze in what area of the economy you're gonna come in. It's not the same to coming on the energy side of things. Even on the energy side, you have differences that need to be analyzed, you know, than to come into the tech industry, the food and beverage industry, the water industry. Where are you gonna be? Are you gonna be in the north? Are you gonna be in the south? So every industry needs to be analyzed differently. And the final advice, and this is something that I gave an interview, they told me, what would be the recommendation to go into the energy sector? I would say, and my answer was, you need to first understand what are the needs and the principles on which this government moves and drives, and do not look at the legal framework. You need to look at it, but that does not matter, you know, because you're not going to get the permit, because you're not going to you have a government that sees differently the things. So those would be my advice when they look at Mexico. But at the end, Mexico is a good place to invest, Rudy. If you do the work, if you have the correct advice, you will get things done. I have clients that are not able to build their ducts in Canada, in the US, because of Indian reserves, because of land issues. So everyone thinks the grass is greener on the other side, but you also have those problems elsewhere, you know?
I agree.
Well, yeah, and more so in Mexico, because some structures are not so developed. I mean, look, I have full confidence in anybody on this panel that would give anybody great advice that comes into Mexico. Otherwise, I wouldn't have you on, okay? But the issue really becomes the investor, the in-house counsel, the U.S. company has to really go in with the mindset that they need to question things as you go along, okay? Well, that's not how we do it here. Understand why you don't do it this way, okay? But actually get involved in the mix and not just say, these are my Mexican consultants. Okay, tell me what I can do. You need to be involved in the day-to-day planning with them, because that's how you know at the beginning if something's going to go well or not at the end. Okay, that's the biggest problem I see with U.S. people going into Mexico. They just think, oh, it's going to be easy, and then boy, are they surprised, right? And so what are some of the risk mitigation things you can do? Obviously, the first one is get some good advice, right? That's the first one. But what are some of the other things you like, Felipe? What would you recommend if somebody's sitting at your desk and says, "I want to go into Mexico"?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I would start, and I totally agree. Get good advisors, get people that are experts in helping foreign investment land softly in Mexico, right? That's why the whole soft landing term exists. First, Mexico is a sophisticated market. As a foreign investor, you need to understand where you are getting into. This is it's the 13th largest country in the world in size, and between the 15th and 16th largest economy in the world. We're not like that just because, right? It is a sophisticated market. It is not to be seen as a low-cost jurisdiction. I think those are one of the biggest mistakes. Oh, I'm going to Mexico because it's so cheap. The reality is that it's not. It's not that cheap. Especially if you're a serious, sophisticated industry. It's a jurisdiction that has its significant added costs like taxes, social security costs, other factors that make your establishment more expensive. So you could do it less costly in other jurisdictions, I can guarantee you. And where you're ever going to set up shop, the country's pretty big. So don't look at it as where it's cheaper. Where is the cheapest labor? Where is the cheapest real estate? Because you'll probably end up in a jurisdiction that does not have the labor skill set that you need, probably doesn't have the infrastructure that you need. So look at it in an integral way. Mexico is pretty much divided like in three big regions, right? You got the north, the center, the Gulf, and the south. And they're all very different. Depending on what industry you belong to, Mexico is pretty broken up in industries, right? You've got the automotive in the Northeast. You've got life sciences in the Northwest. You've got pharma pretty much all over. You've got the Japanese and Asian investment in the Bajío region. So, and sometimes even depending on your sector, if you're agro, you're probably here. If you're electronics, you're probably here. There's a reason for that, right? They have the better industrial parks. They have the better freight forwarders, things like that. Obviously, it becomes more expensive, but in the long run, it could be cheaper. So my biggest takeaways would be don't come in thinking it's a cheap market, because it's not. Two, really look at where you want to land in an integral way, analyzing all your business needs and not just focusing on the cost. definitely get good advice. And I would also concur with Gustavo, honestly. I've done deals with other jurisdictions that are equally or even more complicated than Mexico. So I know it may not be as easy as other jurisdictions, but it's pretty much on the average level with other similar competitors or jurisdictions in all senses, right? Litigation, cost, complications, etc.
Felipe, I know it's not cheap. Trust me, I pay a lot of legal fees in Mexico. So I know it's not cheap. But I don't mind paying, legal fees for people who do a great job, I think the one of the operative words here is chaos, right? You are going to be in a state of chaos because there are a lot of things you do not understand. And even with the best advisors, it's going to take you some time as the customer, let's say the person going in, to really understand it and take the time. Joaquin, with you, I'm sitting at your office in your plush offices, and I'm going to say, I want to do nearshoring in Mexico. What are you going to tell me?
Well, in addition to what has been said, of course, good advice and all the points that they have touched. I mean, one of the important things is to understand that Mexico is a sophisticated country. It's not that Mexico for years has developed a legal framework, supply chains in different sectors of the economy. So what you need to consider is that at the end of the day, you're going to be operating in a particular city, in a particular area, in a particular state. What I'm trying to say that is understanding the local area where you're going to stay is very important. And it's something that is probably everybody puts attention to the structures, to the correct legal vehicles, the logistic. But what about the location where you're going to stay? We have different states, different local jurisdiction, and each of them may have particular. So involvement with the localities, trying to establish from the beginning relationship at the local and state level is key because at the end of the day, you will end up asking for permits, asking for all kind of support, incentives. So, and this is one area where we have seen that big project will get stuck. Once you land it in the cities, in the states, this is where the problems begin. I mean, we have discussed the services that need, the energy, the power that needs to be secure and all that. But the local aspect of it is very important. If you're going to develop a new plant in an industrial park, you need to have support. And that's one of the things that I think I would suggest, in addition to all that, of course, have been discussing, right?
Well, to me, probably one of the most important aspects of the nearshoring is the real estate component. Mm-hmm. Everything has to sit somewhere.
Exactly. As I say.
Everything has to sit somewhere.
Exactly. Just mention, yeah.
Yeah, we're a title insurer. We've issued policies all over the world. Okay. And it's amazing to me how often people go into a country and don't even take a look at the real estate, the risk with the real estate. They're just looking at the deal, right? They're looking at the cash flow. But for example, in Mexico, they're not, well, this is a ejido land, okay? It's all kinds of issues. Can this be owned? This is near the coast. Do we need the trust? What restrictions there are? Honestly, the real estate is probably one of the biggest areas of risk, I think, also. Because otherwise, if the business goes, if the real estate goes, the business goes. And that's the key component. I had to put a shameless plug in, for title insurance, but that's what we do all over the world. And when people, are looking at the risk mitigation fact, what do they look at? They look at risk with the real estate, right? They get letters or audits from CPAs, right? They get stuff from KPMG, from Deloitte. They do all that risk mitigation. And oftentimes what they forget is, well, what's up with the real estate? That's an important issue. It's often overlooked. I would also say, in closing, that people often make the mistake, and I've seen this far too often, and it amazes me that I see it even now, that people think Mexicans are unsophisticated because their perception of the Mexicans are what they see on TV. And I tell you, many big companies that have been outsmarted by local Mexican businessmen because they just thought, oh, well, what do these guys know? And there's a famous example with Corona beer, right? And a merger that took place that fell apart. I won't mention any names, but that's a problem. So the advice I would give to anybody asking me about investing in Mexico or nearshoring is, it is sophisticated. You've got great business people on the other side. And just as you would negotiate with somebody in New York, negotiate the same way in Mexico.
Just one thing, Rudy. Mexico has, I would say, the most prepared and sophisticated team regarding the negotiation of treaties, or at least they had them when we had the USMCA renegotiation. Top team, I would say, the best in the world.
Sure.
Well, yeah. You get into and this is for another topic: investment treaty arbitration, right? However, most of the litigation that comes in with investment treaties has to do whether or not you're a citizen under the treaty. That's where the bulk of the litigation goes to. But yeah, I mean that's there's an arbitration clause with most investment treaties. There's one with NAFTA, the new trade agreement, this World Trade Organization. All that has it. So you don't necessarily have to be stuck in the Mexican courts, let's say. So you can get to a quick resolution on these issues, but that's assuming that you fall under the treaty as a party who can institute the proceeding. And you tell me more than anybody, 'cause I'm sure you handle those. That's even far more complicated analysis, right?
Yeah, we can get into a whole new hour to discuss that. But in summary, I think the USMCA is, for me, the key piece of that would provide legal certainty, as Gustavo mentioned, to the investors. You talk about investment. We have the USMCA has a chapter that provides not only rules for national treatment and protection of investment, but we do have an investment arbitration mechanism that can be used and has been used in many places. So all of this we think we have to be advised to the clients, to the investors, make sure that they understand that it's not that they are coming to a banana republic, This being in Mexico, in practice, manufacturing, we have a very strong developed manufacturing industry all across the border. We have industrial parks, but of course, we have challenges.
Well, the rule is don't ever let your guard down, right?
Yeah.
Not just Mexico. Don't let your guard down anywhere, right?
Anywhere, yeah.
Right. Well, I want to thank you all for appearing here. What I'd like to do is just, in closing, if we can start with Gustavo, tell us a little bit about what your company does and how somebody can reach you. And then I'll have Felipe and then Joaquin, because I do really appreciate the time. There's a world of expertise among you, and thank you for appearing here.
Well, thank you, Rudy, for the invitation. Again, sorry for the voice. So just really fast, Grupo Estrategica Politica is the first public affairs firm in Mexico City, the largest firm right now to do public affairs in Mexico, around 65 professionals here. We represent all sectors, trying to not only come to Mexico, but also navigate the political waters and the regulatory challenges. We work a lot with Cacho Cavazos, with CNN. We're also part of the global partnership at Dentons. Joaquin probably did not know that.
Yeah, I know. With Antonio Ortiz and so. he told
we
us that we were working with them. Of course, yes. Yeah.
We have allies in Washington. We have allies in Brussels. So that's the company, Rudy. I think they can reach me through your outlets, and happy to help anyone come to Mexico and navigate the political environment.
Yeah, and reach out to Gustavo on LinkedIn. They're listed on my LinkedIn connection. Felipe, tell us a little bit about CCN. And by the way, I've had the good fortune and the pleasure of working with both CCN and with Dentons in some other countries. So
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Rudy. Well, our firm, CCN, is a full service law firm. We have 3 offices in the United States and 8 offices in Mexico. One of our core client base is manufacturing, industrial, middle markets, and reason why we have offices located in strategic regions of Mexico that are highly industrialized or highly invested with manufacturing, mainly all across the northern border from Tijuana all the way to Monterrey, and obviously in the center of the country in Mexico City, Querétaro and Guadalajara. We are, like I said, a full service law firm focusing on foreign investment, trying to do business in Mexico. And we've been doing that for 30 years in Mexico. All our offices are organic offices. These are not alliances or anything like that. These are all ours. We are roughly about 85 to 90 lawyers, which for Mexico standards is medium large. Like Gustavo, we represent all sectors, right? Manufacturing, aerospace services, life sciences, agro business, so on and so forth, and all nationalities of foreign investment are well represented at the firm, including, like you said, our Japan desk, right? That tends to all our Japanese clients.
Joaquin?
Just really fast, I got a quick note that CCN is 30 years old today, Felipe.
That is correct. Today is, I purposely didn't mention it, but thank you. That's a little bit self-serving, but yes, today is our 30th anniversary, and we're very happy.
Birthday.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Where's the cake? I would have baked you a cake.
It was earlier. It was earlier today.
Joaquin?
Well, yes, right now we are part of Dentons, which is perhaps the largest global firm with presence in more than 80 countries. Yeah. We've been part of Dentons almost for 7 years, and we are a full service law firm too. Before that, we were almost a boutique firm specialized in key sectors like energy, infrastructure, and manufacturing. Now we have, since we joined Dentons, we can rely on all these different global offices that we have, and most of our clients are for foreign companies, big corporations, big groups. And we also cover all sectors, manufacturing, energy, infrastructure, all of that. I personally handle the international trade, customer, manufacturing practice of the firm. But in addition to that, Dentons offers also different services. Like Gustavo mentioned, we have a subsidiary called Dentons Global Advisor that provides support in trying to support clients in reaching landing softly in this case Mexico. So that's what we do. We're a full service global firm. We used to have offices in China. We do have a relationship with the largest China law firm, which is located in most of the cities in China. And I think we cover all jurisdictions, which is very important because the global clients can rely on us with the certainty that we have presence in all jurisdictions that we cover. So that.
Well, thank you. I'm going to sign off now. My LinkedIn audience, thank you so much for attending. And to anyone who's on, Gustavo, I know you have to go. You've got another meeting. So
Thank you.